When we hear of slavery, many of us likely believe this terrible practice is mostly a thing of humanity's past, something we once did to each other en masse that's faded away as we've created a better society. But what if the truth was exactly the opposite? What if slavery was very much alive and, well, forcing as many as 1 in 200 people on the planet to work against their will? Not only that, but there is evidence that some of the biggest companies on the planet are profiting off the global slave trade. Companies that make products you likely love and could be using right now. Companies that may be knowingly and willingly allowing people just like you to be enslaved against their will, just so they can make more profit. The subject of this video is definitely even quite difficult to speak about, and there will be themes in this video that some people will find unsettling. But sometimes in order to make change in the world, I do believe that you need to shine light on the darkest parts of humanity. So with that caveat out of the way, this is going to be maybe the most confronting video I've ever made. Let's get into it.
Before we get into it, hello, my name is Mika. Welcome to Speak Freely. Here we celebrate the freedom of speech. And I wanted to react to this really interesting react review, because I have already watched it like weeks ago. And when I watched it, I knew that I wanted to present this to my audience. I think this is a really interesting conversation. I believe her name is Sorelle. I could be wrong, but I'll put it on the screen. She is a YouTuber here. She has 2 really large channels. One is about her self-photography. Like she got big for being a really amazing photographer, and she does a lot of her own photography. She's been published and stuff like that, and she also travels quite a bit, so she does a lot of travel videos. But she has a second channel where she talks about really important social and cultural things like this that I think that we all really need to be aware of. She focuses on economics in this channel, but she switches it up now and again. But, there you go. So if you want to, visit her channel, you can either, if there's a link in the description, if not, just remind me, or, YouTube search engine is right there, and you can just type it in and find her. But I encourage, because she has a long list of videos like this, if you want to educate yourself on what's going on, especially when it comes to the world of economics. Or you can go to her other channel if you just want to see her travel and her photography videos. But anyway, let's continue.
Just one side note, we have an amazing newsletter that people absolutely love with important information about finance and freedom topics. If you'd like to find out more, there is a link in the bio. Firstly, I want to illustrate just how big of a problem modern slavery actually is. And in order to do that, we have to take a trip through history. According to records, the first place on earth we know for sure where slavery was practiced was in the Middle East, in ancient Mesopotamia. There, 9,000 years ago, the Sumerian culture commonly kept captured prisoners of war as slaves. A few thousand years after that, we have records that the civilization of Babylon and the ancient empire of Egypt were practicing slavery as a normal part of everyday life. In China, the Shang dynasty was keeping slaves as far back as 4,000 years ago. And in the Chinese Han dynasty, it's estimated that up to 5% of all people in society might have been slaves. But for most of us alive today, we tend to think about slavery in a more modern sense. In particular, the transatlantic slave trade, where millions of African people were forcibly transported to the Americas against their will. In short, slavery has been part of human history for a very long time. And although there's a lot of people still suffering through the emotional scars of what their ancestors had to go through, we generally think that the world is a better place now. And maybe that we've moved on from this barbaric practice, but if you think that, you might actually be wrong.
Stopping it there, I'm glad that she actually pointed out the history of slavery. We've talked about this when it came to the Thomas Sowell videos, the truth about slavery that they do not teach you in schools. A lot of people, for some reason, think Europeans in America was the only country that ever enslaved people, when slavery was going on for hundreds of years or generations and decades before then. The only reason why there was slavery from Africa to Europe and America is because the advancement of technology, ships and boats and stuff like that. Yeah, it was just the way of the world. I don't know why people don't understand that. It's not a good history. It's a terrible, horrible history against humanity. It was a bloody history. There is no country that doesn't have a bloody, oppressive history, but for some reason people only think it's Europe and America. I don't know why. I mean, read a fucking book. Regardless, it's not about tit for tat. It's not about who was the worst slavery society than the other. It's just kind of being aware and being educated. And I think when you realize it really was just the history of the world at the time, it helps you kind of let go of that anger or resentment, because you don't know what's wrong until you know it's wrong. And I'm not saying that it wasn't wrong. I'm not saying that slavery was not wrong and still isn't wrong. But for a lot of people, they just grew up in that and they knew nothing else. It didn't necessarily make them psychopathic, evil maniacs. It's just the way things were back then, even though they are wrong, and it still is wrong. But I just feel like people have this sort of hard-on idea that because they think it's only Europeans or it's only Americans, therefore it's only white people, that white people have some inherent gene that just makes them evil and want to oppress and colonize, when again, this is literally what's going on hundreds of years and generations and decades before Europeans or Americans ever enslaved a soul. Again, all wrong, all terrible. We're all glad that it's mostly done and over with, but just learn your history. And the things she kind of said about like people still suffering about the scars of what happened to their ancestors, it's up to you as an individual to heal your trauma and to heal your scars. So you take that journey, but continuing to pass on that legacy to your children, continue to pass on that scars and that hurt to your children, is really not something you should be doing. We need to celebrate the present and where we've come from and what we have now. Be aware of the history, but don't keep living there. All right, let's continue.
Now, and maybe that we've moved on from this barbaric practice, but if you think that, you might actually be wrong. And to put that into perspective, let's look at some numbers. The transatlantic slave trade lasted approximately 400 years, ending in the early 19th century. And during this time, it's estimated that somewhere around 12 million people in total were shipped across the Atlantic against their will. And while, yes, this number is absolutely staggering, it's actually a third of the number of people estimated to be living in slavery right now. According to the Global Slavery Index, more than 40 million people are living in slavery today. That's more than the entire population of nations like Poland or Canada. The vast majority of this modern slavery is taking place in nations like North Korea, Eritrea, Burundi, and the Central African Republic. And in the African nation of Mauritania, it's estimated that up to 20% of the entire country's population could be living as slaves today. Basically, according to the numbers, it seems that more people are living in slavery today than ever before in history. Now, of course, population percentage-wise, it might be very different because the population was a lot smaller back then. However, one person being enslaved is one person too many. Slavery is slavery, and it is an evil practice no matter who is doing it, how many people are involved in it, where it is happening.
I didn't know that. I didn't know when it came to, of course, she said the population was smaller back then, right? But I didn't know more people are enslaved today than it was back during the Great Slave Trade. When I guess she's talking about the one that most people know about, the ones between Europe and America and stuff like that, and Africa. Didn't know that. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people don't talk about this modern day slavery because A, they're not aware of it. B, they just don't care because they're more self-focused on their own lives, which is understandable. Or C, is because they're people of color. It's Africa, it's Asia, it's people of color. And for some reason, when people of color do some inhumane things, it's kind of overlooked because no one wants to be seen as a racist, or nobody wants to be seen as a colonizer to tell another country or culture how they should run their country and culture, which in some sense I understand as someone who lives abroad and travels quite a bit. But inhumane is inhumane, and oppressive is oppressive. It doesn't really matter what country, culture, or what skin color the people are doing the oppressing. So unfortunately, I think that's the issue. That's why people are refusing to talk about the oppression of the LGBTQ plus communities in Muslim countries or Arabic countries or countries in the Middle East. And Muslim country does not mean automatically Middle Eastern countries. There's a lot of Asian countries that are also Muslim, FYI, because it's not white people, it's people of color. And so it's just kind of sad how people allow their ideology to keep them from speaking out against horrible things. But anyway, Let's continue.
But what I am trying to illustrate is how many people are actually involved in modern slavery today, and I think these numbers will actually probably shock you. In the end though, slavery generally exists because of two reasons: power and money. And so for the rest of the video, I'm going to be talking about the financial implications of modern day slavery. And in particular, I want to focus on one company that is knowingly making profit off slavery, modern day slavery, and it is a company that you've definitely heard of before. For years, Apple has been the darling of global technology industry. Millions of us love their products. Chances are, you might even be watching this video on an Apple device right now. Apple wants you to believe they're a force for good in the world, and its CEO, Tim Cook, has been praised for his humanitarian activism. And over the last couple of years, Apple has donated more than $100 million to social justice projects with the aim of promoting equality for all. So does Apple really care more about the rights of people over profit? Well, it does depend which people you're actually talking about. In 2013, one of Apple's Chinese suppliers, Suyin, was discovered to be employing child labor in one of its factories. Apple demanded the company stop this practice immediately, but 3 months later, an audit showed that even more children were working in Suyin's factory than before. Although Apple was very well aware of this problem, they continued their relationship with Suyin for 3 more years. Their excuse? They couldn't find another quality supplier to produce the parts instead. In 2015, the company Lens Technology was among 7 Apple suppliers found to be using forced labor of Uyghur Muslim people in China. Apple denied this, stating they had found no evidence of slavery in the supply chain themselves. However, it appears as if the US government didn't necessarily agree with Apple's assessment. And so in 2020, the Forced Labor Prevention Act was introduced by Congress, which would ensure that no goods made in Xinjiang with slave labor would be allowed to enter the US market. Now, if Apple was truly confident that their products had no involvement with slave labor, they would be very happy having these laws written. However, it seems that their actions paint a very different picture altogether. Apple didn't directly oppose the bill themselves, possibly because that would have put them in the line of fire. Instead, it was discovered that they paid 2 consulting firms over $90,000 to lobby against these laws being created, possibly in the hope that the act would be weakened or even not implemented at all. This does all sound terrible. Unfortunately, though, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Stopping it there kind of reminds you of that Ricky Gervais, the famous Golden Globe speech or whatever award show that was, where he kind of called out all of these pandering celebrities for supporting companies that very much support oppressive actions towards people and its citizens. Anytime a corporate company, in my opinion, says that they are pro-diversity or pro-people of color or anti-oppression or put up rainbow flags in their logo, they're doing it for the money. They're doing it because it makes them money. They're not doing it because they care about you, and they're not doing it because they care about their community. I'm sorry if you can hear there's kids having fun outside in this really beautiful field in front of my house playing cricket or volleyball, I'm not sure, soccer I think, or kickball. Or football, depending what country you're from. But anywho, I digress. They don't care about you, and they want to make sure you continue to buy their products. That's it. It's all about crony capitalism and just sort of manipulation of the public. Even though I think the public knows this, people are aware of these things, but it's just too hard it takes too much energy to really care for most people, unfortunately. But some of the biggest backers and donors of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset are guilty of these crimes, are guilty of backing modern day slave trade and oppression and child labor. But they say they care. It's the same thing as Disney, when they claim so much they want diversity, they just love diversity, but they shrink down all their actors of colors when they put up their posters or send the posters to China to promote their movies. They care more about making sure that China's very large population continue to give money to the US or US products or American movies than they actually care about diversity. Unfortunately, we all know this once again, but for a lot of people, it's just too much energy to care about these things. I just want to watch a movie. I just want to buy my products. I don't care. Anyway, let's continue.
Because according to research, Apple has been implicated for many different instances of what seems to be forced labor in the supply chain. China's Foxconn is the largest company involved in the assembly of iPhones, and it's estimated that up to 500,000 iPhones are assembled in their factories per day, accounting for 80% of the world's supply. In a 2020 report by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, it was found that Foxconn was taking part in the forced employment of Uyghur Muslims in China, which included the forced transfer of over 500 workers to their factories, including the ones involved in the manufacturing of Apple's products. And even though Apple seems to be getting most of the heat for having possible Uyghur slaves in the supply chain, they are not the only ones mentioned in the report, with companies like Microsoft, BMW, Sony, Samsung, and Volkswagen also being implicated. But it's important to note that Apple still works with Foxconn today. In fact, this supplier accused of using slavery to build iPhones is still one of Apple's single largest supplier of parts and labor at the time of recording this video. Despite all the controversy, Apple's spokesperson Josh Rosenstock mentioned in 2015 that Apple has a zero tolerance for forced labor, and when Tim Cook was questioned about any slavery in the supply chain, this is what he had to say.
Forced labor is abhorrent, and we would not tolerate it in Apple. And so I would love to get with your office and engage on the legislation.
But now that we know Apple's past history on trying to address the slavery issues within their supply chain, do we believe their words now? Companies, of course, change. Practices do change. But is it a conscious change, and has it actually been enforced properly?
I like what she said, are they being enforced properly? If they're trying to say, like, we don't want any products that has any human oppression within the supply chain, but are they enforcing those policies properly? Because with a lot of times what they will do is they will just sort of write an objective or a document or put something out to the public saying we are against child labor, but then they never go to those factories, they never go to that country, they never actually investigate to make sure there's actually not any child labor. They'll just say, we said we didn't want child labor. We asked them if there was child labor, they said there was no child labor, and we just believed them. So they're not really properly enforcing it. It's more like lip service than anything else, but let's continue.
Or is it just now that it's affecting the bottom line that they're concerned about the slavery topics and issues around the world? The last thing to consider here is that many of Apple's Chinese suppliers that are being accused of using forced labor are supplying other companies you know of as well. Components made in the same factories also go into products made by Tesla, as well as items sold by Amazon. And recently, a class action lawsuit was also launched against Apple, Dell, and others, accusing them of supporting human rights abuses in Africa, specifically that they purchased cobalt from the Dominican Republic of Congo that they allegedly knew was being mined by children. Now, it's really not up to me to pass judgment on whether I think these companies are innocent, guilty, making changes. I'd like for you to make up your own mind, and if you have some thoughts to share, I'd love to hear them down below. In a moment, I am going to touch on why I think so many companies are willingly turning their head against modern slavery practices. But before I do, I just want to mention that here, usually I insert some sort of an ad for services or products. However, it really feels distasteful in this video to do so. So instead, I wanted the content to speak for itself and to get it out to as many people as possible. So if there's any ad revenue that is made from this video, we will be passing all of that to anti-slavery efforts. Now, with that out of the way, let's continue the video. I believe one of the most important lessons that we can learn from what I've shared here in this video is that no matter how great a company is telling you that they are, it is really important to look below the surface and see if there's any dark secrets that they might be covering up, because it seems like a lot of big companies have these dirty secrets. Companies like Apple spend billions of dollars per year on public relations trying to get you to think positively about them. And obviously it works because despite the controversies, somehow we still find ourselves wanting and buying their products. And in the end, it means that it's all of us who are responsible for ensuring that their already immense profits continue to grow year by year. In short, it seems that it doesn't really matter how much evil these giant companies are involved in, because they seem to have enough money to counteract any of this negative messaging and continue making us feel like we want to do business with them. Their messages are so powerful that sometimes it counteracts the fact that they might be involved in acts of modern slavery. And so this is why I never really focus on what the words are that the company's saying. Me, I like to focus on actions. Actions speak much louder than words. So in the case of Apple, it seems that although they say they have a zero zero tolerance policy towards forced labor, their actions may suggest a different story. Because if they truly believed in zero tolerance, you would imagine they would cut ties with suppliers the moment they knew they were using child labor. And you would hope that zero tolerance meant that they wouldn't oppose laws that were designed to make slavery less of a problem on our planet. But the truth is, it seems like Apple did the opposite of all of this. And the reason why they might have done this might be very simple. It might be us. As consumers, we demand upgraded devices, new cars, and flashy products almost as fast as manufacturers can get them to us. And we also expect to have these things at a reasonable price that the vast majority of us are able to afford. Not only that, but the millions of shareholders of companies like Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and others always expect that these companies' profits will continue to grow year by year, which in the end creates a system that rewards increasing profits and cutting costs at absolutely all costs. And one of these modern costs is an increased level of slavery. Long story short, slavery is not a thing of the past, and just like it has been throughout history, it seems to be driven by the desire for more stuff, more power, more status, but mostly more money. And of course, whenever there is a chance to acquire more money, it seems that big companies are willing to do just about whatever it takes to increase their profit margins. Acquire as much money as they possibly can, and at the same time trying to trick you into believing that they are the good guy. But in reality, these are companies that could be responsible for the literal enslavement of human beings.
Oh wow, 20 minutes already. I like how she turned the mirror back on the public. She says she wouldn't pass judgment on these companies, whether this is okay or not. I will pass judgment on the company, and I think that it's not okay. But I think it's harder to pass judgment on the public, because if you do, you're basically saying that you're living in a society of a lot of evil people who don't care about the oppression and slavery of millions of other people. Is that what you want to say? Is that what I want to say? But it really is up to the people. Like, even with this super woke pro global warming Gen Z, they still very much contribute to what's going on with fast fashion and everything being super quick and everything being super convenient and everything being super cheap. I mean, with inflation and people struggling financially, are you expecting them to want anything different? Are you expecting them to demand things to be made in their country, in America only, so things would be more expensive? I don't know. I think as an individual, you can do better. I think as a society, we really need to stop obsessing over material fucking possessions. Like, who fucking gives a shit? They're just things. But I think asking that as for society to just cumulatively change in one go is asking for failure. You're asking to be disappointed, because that's not going to happen. So I just think as an individual, you try to do better, and you try to educate people as you can go without sounding like an arrogant, virtue signaling, self-righteous asshole. But I still think as an individual, you try to do better. I think for me, like, I try to do better. I'm naturally a minimalist. As you can see, if you watch my YouTube channels, I wear the same fucking thing over and over again. I've always been that way, even when I lived in LA. I don't care about material possessions. I think it is a waste of time to be obsessed about things. I'm not judging people, but I think it's a waste of time. You can't take that shit when you die with you when you die. However, I'm gonna cut this video now because it is already over 20 minutes long. I hope you guys enjoy this. Please go visit her channel. Tell me, guys, what do you think of what I said, what she said, in the comment section below. Do you have any solutions? Let us know. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to get the notifications when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can donate. My PayPal and Cash App link is in the description box below and also in the comment section. Of course, it helps, but you don't have to. You can just like, comment, and subscribe. Another great way to support this channel is visit my brand new merch shop. Links down below, and links to all of the alternate platforms I'm on, my socials, including my Twitter. All the ways to support me is always in the links down below. I also have my travel vlog channel. I travel as a lifestyle, or I live abroad. If you'd like to know where I am in the world, you can go in the description box below and also in the comment section. Hit the link, go subscribe to my travel vlog channel, and or follow me on my travel Instagram. My stories is usually what's most up to date. And you guys have an amazing day. Bye.